No one believed Ethan Cole, the powerful CEO labeled infertile, could still dream of having a family. But when Jade appeared holding 3 positive tests, something inside him shattered, and what he saw in her eyes made his heart stop. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Ethan Cole opened his eyes to the sound of urgent buzzing on his nightstand. The digital clock revealed an hour far too early for urgent business, but there was no escaping reality. He reached for his phone, scanning the incoming news alerts that lit up the screen in a frenzied carousel of headlines. The top story jumped out immediately. His ex-wife Victoria had unleashed a new wave of allegations about his supposed infertility. Bold letters declared, "Ethan Cole can't have children," or a legacy. Each word felt like a hammer blow echoing through his apartment's quiet morning air. Gripped by disbelief, he scrolled down to see comment after comment, speculation piling high. The sensation in his chest was part anger, part dread. He knew Victoria's capacity for theatrics, but this attack was painfully personal. Rumors were one thing. Seeing them plastered across business columns and celebrity gossip pages was quite another. He let out a shaky breath. There would be no time for a quiet morning coffee. He had a reputation to salvage. Still wearing his rumpled sleep shirt, he reached out to call his public relations officer. The line rang once before an anxious voice greeted him. "Ethan, I've been trying to reach you for the last half hour. It's all over the media. The board is already up in arms." He gripped the edge of the countertop, eyes flickering to the headlines still glowing on his phone. "Pull together the crisis team," he said firmly. "I'm heading to the office in 15 minutes. We need a statement, something that addresses this head-on." He paused, swallowing the discomfort that threatened to choke him. "And for now, leave Victoria's name out of it." Hanging up, he rushed through his morning routine, suits strewn haphazardly around as he chose something crisp and commanding. He pictured the reporters outside Cole Industries' glass tower downtown, hungry for a glimpse of him. A knot twisted in his stomach, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. He was, after all, the CEO of a major corporation. The scandal might be personal, but it had erupted onto a very public stage. When he finally slid into the driver's seat of his black sedan, phone calls bombarded him the moment he turned the ignition. Some were from investors, their voices quaking with concern about the company's future. Others were from friends, people who had glimpsed the news at breakfast and worried about how he was holding up. It was almost impossible to keep his eyes on the early morning city traffic, but he forced himself to focus. Sirens wailed in the distance, merging with the ambient sounds of downtown life. He pressed the Bluetooth earpiece tighter, responding briskly to each anxious inquiry. "Yes, I saw it. No, Victoria doesn't have any proof. We're drafting a statement. Thank you for calling." A crowd of photographers milled at the entrance of Cole Industries when he pulled up. Cameras flashed, voices clamored. "Ethan, is it true?" one journalist shouted. Another, brandishing a microphone, called out, "Do you plan to sue Victoria for defamation?" He pushed his way through, silent, jaw set. Security guided him past the glass doors into the towering lobby, where a second wave of tension smacked into him. Employees gathered in small clusters, whispering. Once they spotted him, they straightened, offering stiff, polite smiles. He recognized the undercurrent of fear. Cole Industries was stable, but with enough bad press, any company could be destabilized. Upstairs, the elevator opened onto a scene of organized chaos. Assistants scurried between cubicles, handing out printed updates. Telephones rang non-stop. People parted to let Ethan through, their expressions a mix of sympathy and curiosity. At the far end of the corridor, he noticed a group of worried executives crowding near the boardroom. It didn't help that headlines about his alleged infertility were overshadowing the crucial project launches the company had planned for the quarter. Numbers were everything in a world guided by profits, and negative rumors could shake investor faith in a heartbeat. He entered the boardroom to find half a dozen stern faces around a polished table. A digital screen displayed news clips, muted but showing segments of talking heads dissecting his private life like it was a corporate financial statement. He swallowed hard and faced them, shoulders back. "We're putting out a statement," he began, trying to maintain composure. "I won't stand by and let this nonsense become the narrative. Victoria's claims are baseless." The company's legal counsel cleared her throat. "With all due respect, this is more than a rumor. She's gone on record. There's mention of possible medical documentation. Something about fertility tests." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Medical history is private. She has no right to share anything. Trust me, I'm looking into my legal options." A flicker of uncertainty passed through his eyes, but he held steady. He needed to show he was still in control, especially if some part of him actually worried about the validity of Victoria's claims. That was a thought he pushed aside swiftly. The meeting exploded into rapid-fire concerns. Someone worried about the drop in stock value already hitting the markets. Another insisted they get a public relations expert on the news channels ASAP. Others proposed immediate damage control or demanded an apology, even though no one could pinpoint what Ethan was supposed to apologize for. Through it all, he stood firm, weaving through each statement with a measured rebuttal. He had built coal industries up, piece by piece, from his father's failing enterprise into a modern powerhouse, and he refused to watch it crumble under gossip. The clamor died down when a junior assistant stepped in to lower the volume on the screens. "Sir, Ms. Jade Moore has arrived for her 10 o'clock. She's waiting in the reception area." Murmurs rippled across the table. People had forgotten about that meeting entirely, overshadowed by the scandal. Ethan recalled the name. Jade Moore was the architect with big ideas about sustainable design, a plan to reduce coal industry's environmental footprint. He'd been intrigued but too busy to arrange a proper meeting, so she had insisted on coming in person. "Fine," he said, straightening the lapels of his suit jacket. "Give me a few minutes, then show her in." He turned his attention back to the board, scanning the uncertain faces. "Look," he said, "we can't just freeze the entire company because of this. Business goes on. We have expansions in play, new ventures on the horizon. Let me handle Victoria's nonsense. Meanwhile, let's make sure we're not neglecting our real job, protecting and growing this business." The conversation petered out as they agreed to regroup later in the day. Stepping outside the boardroom, Ethan found Jade standing quietly in the bustling reception area. She was slender, dressed in a polished but understated outfit, her posture composed despite the swirling tension around her. She held a large portfolio and a small model of a futuristic-looking facility. Their eyes met, and she offered a brief, polite smile. "Mr. Cole," she said, voice steady, "I'm here to discuss the sustainable architecture proposal. I realize this may not be the best day, but—" He gestured for her to follow him toward a quieter corner, near a row of tall windows overlooking the city below. "It's been a hectic morning," he admitted, scanning her polite yet determined expression. "But if you have a plan that can modernize our image, we're all ears right now." She nodded, grateful for the moment of focus. He noticed how she remained poised, unfazed by the harried employees darting past. Her expression suggested she understood the stakes for coal industries. Maybe, he mused, this could be the breath of fresh air the company needed during a time when negative headlines threatened to bury them. Before they could delve into details, a commotion nearby caught their attention. The blaring sound of a TV in the lobby, tuned to a business network. Victoria's face dominated the screen in a brief interview clip, her soft voice laced with faux concern. "Ethan has always been ambitious," she was saying. "I wish him well, even if it's heartbreaking that he can't build a real legacy." The interviewer leaned forward, drinking in every word. Jade flicked her gaze at Ethan, an unspoken question in her eyes. His fingers dug into the edge of her presentation folder, knuckles white. "Sorry," he managed, handing it back. "We'll talk soon. I just need—" He paused, letting out a breath he'd been holding. I just need to handle this." While Jade stepped aside to give him space, Ethan's phone buzzed urgently. The CFO was calling to say the stock was nosediving faster than they'd expected. Fear pulsed through him. That was the brutal reality. Companies could fail on mere perception. Suddenly, business overshadowed personal feelings, reminding him that his empire was on shaky ground. He promised the CFO he'd address the rumors publicly by the day's end. Not long after, the company's PR chief sent him a draft of a press release, words carefully chosen to neither confirm nor deny Victoria's claims. Ethan rubbed his temple, frustration mounting. Denials would only stoke the media's curiosity. Remaining silent might appear cowardly. Either option felt like a trap. As he left the boardroom again, he spotted Jade calmly showing her design concepts to a small group of employees. They seemed enthralled, breaking into muted smiles as she explained how the new eco-friendly structures could reduce operating costs. Ethan found himself oddly grateful that, in the midst of all the swirling chaos, someone was thinking constructively. Perhaps if he embraced this project sooner rather than later, it could restore the public's faith in coal industries. After a marathon of crisis phone calls, the day inched closer to evening. The hustle outside his glass office walls never really settled. By the time the last investor call ended, the building's lights had begun to dim. Those board members still remaining had retreated to their own corners, leaving Ethan restless. He slipped out, heading to the deserted corridor that led to an outdoor balcony few people used. Night had fallen over the city, the skyline glittering. He stepped into the cool air, tension radiating off him like a storm cloud. This was what he had built, the towering buildings, the emblem of coal industries that marked everything from the lobby to letterheads. He refused to let Victoria's vendetta tear it all down. His phone vibrated again. Another message. He glanced at the screen and frowned at the unknown number, uncertain what to expect. When he opened it, a single line flashed across the display. "You think you can hide the truth forever?" He froze, heart thudding. So it was more than gossip or petty vengeance. Someone else was involved, orchestrating a bigger threat. He tightened his grip on the phone, knuckles turning white against the metal railing as the city lights flickered below him. Ethan steps out onto the office balcony, phone buzzing. An unknown number texts him, "You think you can hide the truth forever?" He grips the railing, the city lights below, realizing someone is orchestrating a bigger threat than simple rumors. Ethan stood at the window of his penthouse, gazing at the busy streetlights below, still shaken by the menacing text he'd received the night before. He had tried calling the unknown number a dozen times throughout the morning, but each attempt led to dead silence or a quick disconnect. That only deepened his suspicion that someone was working against him in the shadows. A sleepless night hadn't helped, and now, despite the dawn of a new day, he felt no less tense. Shortly after arriving at the coal industries building, he stepped out of the elevator, phone in hand, scanning for any follow-up threats. The swirl of employees rushing to their desks distracted him. He knew his entire team was on edge. Worried phone calls from anxious investors had started flooding in again before sunrise. He spotted Jade Moore waiting near his office door, portfolio tucked under her arm, a poised smile on her face. She seemed calm in the midst of the chaos. "Ethan," she said gently, "I wanted to see if we could continue the conversation about the project. I'm aware everything's in turmoil, but—" He gave a quick nod, appreciating her professionalism. "Of course. Let's sit for a minute." He opened his office door, gesturing for her to enter. Towering windows provided a view of the city's early morning bustle. Despite the comfortable surroundings, a stifling tension weighed on them both. She set her portfolio on his desk. Inside were sketches, data charts, and proposals. He flipped through them as she explained, voice steady and focused. "It's about showing the world that coal industries is forward-thinking. Sustainable architecture gets positive press, reduces costs, and modernizes operations." A hint of enthusiasm warmed her tone. Plus, implementing green solutions might help shift the conversation away from all the gossip. He paused, catching her meaning. Yes, we need something else for people to focus on. People need to see we're still innovating no matter what rumors are floating around. He drummed his fingers on the desk. Your timing is good, though I wish it were under better circumstances. His gaze lingered on the lines of her designs. They looked clean, efficient, like a blueprint for a stronger future he was suddenly desperate to secure. A brisk knock on the door interrupted them. The head of PR entered with a troubled expression. Ethan, we have a new wave of headlines. Victoria gave an exclusive to a major network this morning, painting an even bleaker picture of your personal situation. Jade glanced at Ethan, concerned. He forced himself to keep calm. Let's hear it. She implied you went to fertility clinics in secret and that you've been lying to shareholders about wanting an heir to the business. The PR chief winced as if delivering a blow. She also hinted that there are people on the inside who might confirm her story. Ethan felt a sharp pang in his chest. The insinuations were getting bolder, and the worst part was how they threatened to pull the entire company under a cloud of suspicion. No comment until I decide otherwise, he said, swallowing a knot of frustration. Get me a summary of all that was said, and keep the board updated. The PR chief nodded, then hurried away. Silence settled in the office. Ethan realized Jade was watching him with sympathy, something that felt both kind and unsettling, given how few people ever witnessed him at a low point. Clearing his throat, he returned his focus to her plans. Let's talk about next steps, he said, wanting to anchor himself in real work. She spent the next half hour detailing the pilot project, a smaller-scale facility that would showcase eco-friendly tech coal industries could later apply company-wide. He asked questions, impressed by her readiness with facts, numbers, and potential partnerships. This was the kind of proactive thinking he valued. Even in the darkest hour, a practical solution sparkled like a lifeline. They stepped out into the hallway together, continuing their discussion. Up ahead, they noticed a small group of board members deep in conversation. Sensing an opportunity, Ethan headed straight for them. Gentlemen, good morning. I'd like to reintroduce Jade Moore and her sustainable architecture concept, he began, his voice assertive. Though the men looked unsettled, surely the scandal weighed on their minds. One of them, Mr. Hastings, gave a slight nod of encouragement. We're all ears, he said, doing his best to project stability. Jade launched into her pitch with a confident glow. She explained how the pilot project could not only save money long-term but also serve as a public symbol that coal industries remained an industry leader, undaunted by rumors. A few of the board members exchanged wary looks, uncertain about investing time and resources into a new project during such turbulent times. But to Ethan's quiet relief, Mr. Hastings chimed in, I think it's a solid idea, especially now. Public opinion can shift if they see we're continuing to innovate. Another member nodded reluctantly, and Jade seized the chance to show her detailed charts. She flipped open a page illustrating potential energy savings, adding, This is just the tip of the iceberg. If we can show progress here, other divisions might open up to the concept. Ethan spotted at least one person raise an eyebrow favorably. Jade's determination was infectious. For a moment, he felt a sense of triumph slip through the gloom. If he could keep the board's support on new ventures, there was still a chance to steer the conversation away from Victoria's malicious claims. Just when it seemed Jade had won a small measure of approval, a sudden burst of voices echoed from the corridor's far end. A reporter, somehow past security, shouted Ethan's name. Microphones bristled in the air like spears aimed at him. Cameras blinked, capturing every second. Ethan Cole, are you hiding more secrets? Are the rumors about fertility treatments true? The reporter's words bounced off the walls. Jade and several board members stiffened in alarm. Security guards rushed forward, trying to corral the intruder. A wave of tension swept through the offices, sending employees peeking warily from doorways. For a moment, Ethan considered answering, but the words refused to form. Anything he said might be twisted. Instead, he raised a hand, signaling he had no comment. The guards forcibly escorted the journalist out, despite her loud protests that the public had a right to know. In the uneasy hush that followed, Ethan noticed Jade breathing quickly, as if rattled by the public ambush. "It's always like this?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. "Not always," he replied, voice low. "But it's getting worse." He gave the board members a grim look. "We need to get ahead of this. I'll deal with the media, but for now, let's finalize the pilot project details. We need good news, and fast." The reminder of forward momentum seemed to calm everyone. Jade collected her folder, the subtle hope in her face dimmed by the sudden confrontation. Yet there was an unwavering set to her jaw, as if she refused to let sensational headlines erase her hard work. "Thank you all for listening," she said quietly before stepping away. Ethan watched her go, a swirl of emotions churning in his mind. Though overshadowed by tension, there was a spark of possibility in Jade's plan that he refused to ignore. Late that evening, Ethan found himself alone again, hunched over his office desk. The skyline was painted in flickers of gold and red, reflecting in the tall glass windows. A day that had started on a note of suspicion had only grown more complicated. He recalled how Jade's calm presence had stirred the board to at least consider her designs. That small victory might be enough to plant seeds of optimism among stakeholders, despite the chaos fueled by Victoria's televised jabs. Feeling the weight of exhaustion, he leaned back in his chair. A momentary sense of respite settled in. He could almost imagine a future in which coal industries was lauded for cutting-edge sustainability, not infamous for a scandal. His phone screen lit up with new messages. He flipped through them, ignoring half a dozen from gossip sites pressing for a comment. A single email subject line caught his eye. Proof of Victoria's secret meeting. That quick jolt of adrenaline spiked his curiosity. He opened it. Attached was a grainy photograph of Victoria sitting in a sleek lobby with a man Ethan recognized immediately, a powerful rival CEO who had circled coal industries for months, hoping to siphon off key clients. The photo's date stamp showed it had been taken only 2 nights prior. Beneath the image, the brief text read, "They're plotting your downfall. Proof attached." An email pings into Ethan's inbox late at night. A leaked photograph of Victoria meeting with a top competitor. The subject line reads, "They're plotting your downfall. Proof attached." Ethan paced the length of his office, illuminated only by the glow of the city lights beyond the glass walls. The photograph on his phone confirmed his mounting suspicions. Victoria had been meeting with a known corporate rival. It wasn't just a rumor anymore. He now had proof of her potential betrayal. He tapped his phone screen, forwarding the image to one of his most trusted advisors at Coal Industries, a reserved but sharp-minded legal consultant named Grace. Within minutes, she strode into his office, wearing the same tight-lipped expression Ethan had. She studied the image carefully, her brow furrowing. "I know this man," she said quietly. "He's been trying to poach our investors for months. And now he's partnered with Victoria?" She looked up at Ethan, concern etched across her features. "This could be bigger than we thought." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, the tension settling in deeper. Victoria always liked a dramatic entrance, but this... He let out a weary sigh. "She's crossing a line. How do we contain this before it blows up in our faces?" Grace took a moment to gather her thoughts. "First, we keep this evidence under wraps, at least until we can confirm the extent of her involvement. Second, I suggest we brace for a turbulent few days. The board's skittish, and if this gets out, the damage might be hard to contain." Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed again. Yet another meeting alert. The entire week was booked with investor luncheons, crisis talks, and departmental check-ins. Outside the office door, the hallway hummed with an uneasy energy, employees huddling in corners, half worried and half curious. He steeled himself and headed out, leaving Grace to handle further legal possibilities. The next day, Ethan found himself in a private dining room downtown, an oak-paneled venue known for hosting power lunches. Several anxious investors circled a long table set with crisp white linens and meticulously arranged cutlery. Ethan recognized the tension in their eyes. They wanted reassurance, and he was there to provide it. "So, are you going to address these allegations directly?" one investor asked, clearing his throat. "We keep hearing troubling things about your personal matters." Ethan offered a practiced, measured smile. "I appreciate your concern. Coal Industries is strong and remains focused on growth. My personal life is just that, personal." He paused briefly, as if weighing his words. "But I can tell you that the scandal you're hearing about has no basis in fact, and if you allow us a little time, we will prove that." There was a murmur of acknowledgement, although he sensed a layer of skepticism lingering beneath the surface. Just as he was about to pivot into an update on new contracts, one investor leaned forward, voice dropping. "What about Jade Moore? Is there truth to the rumor she's more than just a collaborator?" Ethan resisted the urge to clench his jaw. He had expected that question. "She's an accomplished architect with a proposal that could revolutionize our operations. Anything else is tabloid gossip." With that, he signaled a shift in conversation, turning to profitability forecasts. Yet, as the luncheon concluded, Ethan realized many eyes had flickered with doubt. The company's numbers might still be good, but the relentless rumor mill was chipping away at confidence. Back at headquarters, Jade pressed on, though the atmosphere grew more volatile each day. She spent hours refining her sustainable designs with an engineering team, combing over every detail of her pilot project. She hoped that delivering concrete progress would boost internal morale and offer a sliver of positivity in the media storm raging outside. One afternoon, she logged onto her workstation and froze. Key design files were missing. Entire folders had vanished from her computer's directory. Her heart pounded as she clicked through every file path, searching in vain. "This can't be an accident," she muttered under her breath. She flagged down the engineering team leader, who shook his head, perplexed. Word of the disappearance circulated swiftly. Some employees whispered that Jade must have misplaced them, lacking the corporate experience to protect sensitive data. Others suggested a deliberate inside leak, and, predictably, a few bored souls spun this into a new rumor. Jade's closeness to the CEO was finally catching up with her, putting confidential projects at risk. Throughout the hallways, the chatter about Jade and Ethan intensified. Many assumed the discreet talks they held about the sustainable architecture project indicated a budding affair. Whispers arose, fueled by the tabloids, which latched onto any angle that could link the two. Murmured judgments about Jade's true motives circulated, clouding her reputation. It frustrated her, but she tried to keep her composure, pouring herself into recovering the lost data and proving her team's innocence. Victoria then surfaced again, hosting a press conference with a sympathetic network. Her words dripped with theatrical concern. "I've heard so many rumors," she said, eyes wide with false sincerity, "about who Ethan might be involved with now. Of course, I can't speak to Jade Moore's intentions, but I do hope she's not exploiting him in his vulnerable state." She paused for effect. "I want only the best for Ethan, despite everything we've been through." Those phrases fueled fresh gossip, prompting tabloids to label Jade a gold digger, painting her as just another ambitious operative climbing corporate ranks through personal connections. Watching the broadcast from his office, Ethan felt his gut twist in anger. He remembered how Jade had come to Coal Industries with nothing but a bold design plan. She deserved better than this shallow smear. He decided to seek her out that evening, finding her in one of the design labs, hunched over a blueprint with reddened eyes. "Hey," he said softly, stepping in. "I'm sorry you got dragged into all of this." She looked up and forced a small smile. "I knew the stakes when I came here. Still, I didn't expect, well, all of this." She gestured at her phone, which kept blinking with notifications from social media. "But I can handle it," she added, a touch of iron in her voice. "I'm not running away just because Victoria wants to fling mud." Ethan nodded, relief mingling with guilt. "I promise I'll do everything I can to protect you and your work," he said. "You're not alone." The next morning, a particularly heated board meeting ensued. News of the missing design files reached the board, and a few members were quick to question Jade's competence. "What if the data loss is her fault?" demanded one middle-aged executive, arms folded tightly. "We can't afford another controversy." Jade stood at the head of the table, brow furrowed, eyes unwavering. "Those files disappeared from my computer without any trace of me removing them. I have the rest of the team to confirm the timelines." One board member who had known Jade's father years before spoke up in her defense. "This is a serious breach, but let's not rush to blame her. The timing is too convenient." He cast a meaningful glance around the room. "We should consider that someone wants to sabotage this project." A tension crackled in the air. Ethan saw Jade's face flicker with gratitude. Though the meeting ended with no firm conclusion, the growing suspicion of an inside job lingered. Later that day, Jade prepared to demo a key feature of the sustainable architecture plan for a small group of potential partners. The demonstration took place in a sleek, open concept area near the R&D division. She stood in front of a large display screen, sketches and data visuals ready to showcase. But a sudden commotion at the entryway made her pause mid-sentence. Reporters had sneaked past security, raising cameras and shouting, "Jade, is it true you're out to replace Victoria in Ethan Cole's life?" Flustered, she stepped back from the display as security staff rushed in. Some of the reporters insisted they were there to cover a big scandal. The crowd jostled, and in the chaos, the demonstration equipment was nearly knocked over. One photographer's lens crashed to the floor, prompting him to curse loudly. Another staff member tried to shield Jade from questions. Within minutes, the confrontation was caught on every smartphone in the room and live streams pinged across social media. The scuffle, loud, unprofessional, and undeniably public, sparked headlines about coal industry's inability to maintain control over even a simple demo. The PR meltdown was immediate. Still, a government official who had come to observe the demonstration found Jade's brief introduction promising. He discreetly told her, "If you can get this off the ground, we might have incentive programs to support green infrastructure. Don't be discouraged." Despite the fiasco, that small win stoked a quiet spark of hope. Jade relayed the official's words to Ethan, who clung to the good news. Still, he was incensed by the intrusion and the media's intrusion. He called a private security meeting that night, openly declaring, "No more playing nice. We need to lock down this building. No unauthorized reporter, no suspicious visitor. We are rooting out whoever is feeding information to these people." Once the halls were empty and the lights dimmed, Jade sat with an IT specialist in a small office littered with cables and monitors, determined to retrieve her missing files. Screen after screen of code flickered before them. After hours of combing through system logs, they finally hit on a clue. Digital footprints tied to a high-ranking senior executive. A name that made Jade's stomach clench when she saw it. The same man had been spotted meeting with the rival who'd circled coal industries for months. She looked at the IT specialist, both of them stunned by the realization. "It's exactly who we suspected, isn't it?" she whispered, feeling her pulse race. "He's probably working both sides." Ethan was in his office going over the day's disasters when Jade burst in with a folder of evidence. His eyes went wide as he read the logs. "This explains everything. The sabotage, the missing files, the press leaks. He's been working against us from within." Relief fought with anger, surging in his chest. "We have him now," he said, voice trembling slightly. "We can stop all this." The moment felt like a breakthrough. But just as they were about to discuss how to use the information, Ethan's phone rang, a blocked number. He hesitated, then answered, immediately greeted by a low, menacing voice. "Back off, or you lose everything." This is your final warning." He froze, heart pounding at the unmistakable threat. Whoever was behind this was powerful, and they weren't done tightening the noose. Ethan sat in his office at daybreak, the skyline behind him still tinged with the pink of early morning. He hadn't slept much. The warning from the night before continued to rattle him. "Back off, or you lose everything." He tapped his phone against the desk, contemplating the gravity of that threat. Jade was due to arrive soon so they could finalize details for a public announcement that might shift all the negative buzz. If they could present a bold initiative, maybe the media and investors would latch onto something besides the endless rumors. When Jade showed up, her expression was grim but resolute. She took a seat and folded her hands, trying to steady herself. "Ethan," she said, "tell me honestly, do you think we're in real danger? This threat wasn't just about defamation, was it?" He exhaled, nodding. "Somebody is determined to dismantle us. That phone call confirmed it. We have to stay vigilant. The best way to fight back is to shine a light on what we're doing right." His gaze strayed to the blueprints laid across the table. "Let's finalize the pilot project announcement today. If we can get some public goodwill, our saboteurs might lose momentum." Outside his office, a quiet hush had descended on the normally bustling hallway. Employees sensed tension thick as a cloud, aware that big decisions were being made behind closed doors. Gossip flourished, of course, but most people seemed too nervous to engage in more than furtive whispers at the water cooler. By mid-morning, Ethan and Jade joined the weekly board meeting, a gathering overshadowed by frayed nerves. Several board members looked restless, their eyes shifting anxiously from Ethan to one another. The head of PR was also in attendance, phone on silent, but face etched with worry. Ethan cleared his throat. "I want to open with a progress report on Jade's sustainable architecture project," he began, forcing confidence into his tone. "We've managed to rebuild most of the missing data, and we've done enough preliminary work to announce a pilot phase." Before he could continue, a senior board member leaned forward, scowling. "And how does that address the crisis exactly? Our stock is still dropping. Rumors of insider leaks haven't stopped. Half of our investors want answers now, or they'll pull their funding." His voice sharpened. "You're expecting us to let you distract from your personal scandal with a new venture? We need immediate results." Ethan resisted the urge to snap back. Instead, Jade stepped forward, maintaining composure. "We're not distracting from anything. This pilot project will modernize coal industries, reduce long-term costs, and improve our public image. It's a solid business decision, not just good PR." A few board members shot her skeptical looks. Another demanded, "And the tabloids accusing you of cozying up to Ethan for personal gain? You realize that puts the entire project under a spotlight of suspicion?" Heat flared in Jade's cheeks, but she responded calmly, "I'm here to work, that's all. Anyone who's actually reviewed my designs can see the potential." She met each pair of eyes steadily. "I welcome scrutiny of my credentials, because there's nothing to hide." The tension bristled in the room. One or two board members murmured grudging agreement that the pilot might indeed help. Ethan seized that moment. "We announce the pilot at a press conference tomorrow. We show real numbers, real vision. That's how we move forward." The words resonated with some of the board, and a few nods followed. Just as they started to settle on next steps, one of the board's assistants burst in, breathless. "Sir, there's been a release of older documents, medical documents claiming they belong to you." Her eyes darted nervously. "They're being circulated online, suggesting you've been undergoing fertility treatments for years." Ethan felt his insides twist. Victoria, clearly, had launched another ploy to discredit him. No matter how baseless, the mere mention of fertility treatments was enough to inflame the rumor that he was using Jade to produce an heir or bolster some twisted corporate legacy. The boardroom erupted into hurried chatter. "This is exactly the sort of thing that undermines our stock price," someone snapped. "We need a firm denial, a statement." Ethan balled his hands into fists under the table but kept his voice even. "We'll address it publicly. If anyone wants more proof, I have none to give, but these so-called documents are either fabricated or irrelevant. In the meantime, we stay on course with the pilot project." He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "That's all." The group dispersed, leaving Jade and Ethan alone. He caught a glimpse of her stoic face, sensing the strain she was under. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She managed a small shrug. "I'm not the one at the center of this storm, but I am under fire. The gossip columns are accusing me of manipulating you for company shares." A flash of anger crossed his eyes. "They don't know you at all. I'll refute it publicly if you want." Her gaze softened. "I'd appreciate that, but it might only fuel their speculation. I'd rather let my work speak for itself." That afternoon, a glimmer of positivity broke through. A potential investor reached out, intrigued by Jade's designs. The phone call was brief but encouraging. Though a minor backer, his endorsement could signal others that Cole Industries wasn't crippled by scandal. Ethan hung up, feeling a flicker of hope, but it was swiftly doused when his assistant announced yet another crisis. The company's internal server had gone down. Files for Jade's pilot project were inaccessible. Again. In the IT department's dimly lit room, Ethan and Jade stood behind frustrated technicians typing frantically. "We've never had so many issues in such a short span," one exclaimed. "It's like someone is deliberately targeting the system to delay your project." Ethan's frustration built. He could almost feel the sabotage tightening around them, piece by piece. Once the server was finally restored, Jade tracked down a colleague rumored to have questionable ties to one of their corporate rivals. Spotting him alone in the copy room, she cornered him, stepping into his personal space just enough to unsettle him. "Care to explain why your login credentials keep showing up around sabotaged files?" she asked, voice clipped. The man paled slightly, shifting on his feet. I just left my laptop unattended once or twice. Someone must have used it. I'm not involved." Yet his eyes flitted around, lacking conviction. Jade narrowed her gaze. "If that's true, I suggest you let the IT team look at your device. If you're innocent, you have nothing to hide, right?" Without waiting for a reply, she spun on her heel and strode away, pulse pounding. She wasn't sure he was guilty, but the timing and evidence were too suspicious to ignore. That evening, Ethan felt a need to regroup with allies, so he organized a quiet dinner at a discreet restaurant. Jade arrived, along with a single board member who still believed in Ethan's leadership. They claimed a private table near the back. Dim candlelight played over their tense faces. The air smelled of roasted garlic and fresh herbs, a comforting contrast to the corporate battleground they'd left behind. They conversed in hushed voices, discussing the next morning's press conference. The board member vowed to stand by Ethan publicly, praising Jade's architectural approach. For a moment, camaraderie replaced the stress, and a faint smile touched Jade's lips. It felt good to talk strategies without the swirl of eyes or cameras. Eventually, the conversation turned personal. Ethan admitted, voice low, "This scandal is testing every boundary. The worst part is not knowing if any of Victoria's allegations might hold a shred of truth about my own limitations." He swallowed as though revealing something raw. "I always wanted a family someday, but all this is turning it into a corporate chess game." Jade placed a hand gently on his forearm. "You don't owe the world an explanation for your medical history." She spoke softly, the board member politely looking away to grant them a semblance of privacy. "You'll figure out the personal side of things. But right now, you have a company to protect. We both do." Just then, the restaurant's front entrance burst into a frenzy. Paparazzi, tipped off by someone, clambered in with flashing cameras. Waitstaff rushed to intervene, but the photographers snapped pictures of Ethan and Jade rising from their seats, capturing every angle of their startled expressions. The board member cursed under his breath, covering his face. Security escorted them out through a side door. In the narrow alley, Ethan and Jade found themselves pressed close, hearts pounding with adrenaline. For a split second, they locked eyes, breath catching in each other's presence. There was an electricity there, part fear, part exhaustion, part fragile closeness amid chaos. Ethan's hand brushed Jade's shoulder, steadying her. They slipped into a waiting car, the board member following behind into a second vehicle. As the driver pulled away, Jade stared out the window, dark city streets rushing by. "Someone must have tipped them off," she whispered, pressing her fingers to her temples. Ethan nodded, fury swirling behind his composed facade. "We can't trust even private dinners anymore." A heavy silence settled. Then, almost as if to ease the weight, Ethan spoke softly. "Thank you for having my back tonight. I appreciate it more than you know." Jade glanced at him, eyes flickering with a mixture of empathy and something unspoken. "We'll get through this," she said gently, though it sounded like a prayer more than a statement. Back at Cole Industries, the driver dropped Ethan at his private entrance while Jade continued on to her apartment. Ethan climbed the steps into his office, finally alone, the hum of street traffic fading below. As he flicked on the light, he saw a slip of paper had been pushed under his door. Puzzled, he picked it up. One line, typed in stark black text, glared back at him. "We will end your legacy, starting with Jade." Ethan stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his office, still grappling with the threatening note he'd found the previous night. "We will end your legacy, starting with Jade." The gravity of those words weighed heavily on him. He knew he had to protect her, not just because the project depended on her, but because, despite everything, he genuinely cared. He immediately arranged for discreet security measures, instructing his head of corporate security to escort Jade to and from her car and ensure she never walked the halls alone after hours. That morning, Jade arrived at work with a tense smile. She noticed the subtle shift. A security guard walked a short distance behind her, and the receptionist waved her through faster than usual. Whispers circled among colleagues. Jade felt every glance as she passed by. Some looked sympathetic, others suspicious. Since rumors linking her to Ethan had spiraled, the gossip had grown sharper. The tabloid-fueled narrative that she was somehow using Ethan's infertility scandal for her own gain had turned once friendly co-workers into wary observers. She found Ethan waiting by her desk, his face etched with concern. "I've requested extra security for you," he said quietly. "If you feel uncomfortable at any moment, let me know." Jade's cheeks burned slightly, torn between gratitude and embarrassment. "Thank you," she murmured. "I hate that it's come to this, but I'll manage." As they spoke, a flurry of activity erupted near the elevator bank. Several reporters had managed to tail an unsuspecting intern inside the building, and they were now snapping photos and shouting questions. A security guard quickly intercepted them, guiding them back out, but not before one journalist yelled across the lobby, "Jade, any comment on your so-called romance with the infertile CEO?" Faces turned. Conversations hushed. Ethan stiffened. Jade clenched her teeth and turned away, heading for the corner conference room. No way would she give the media any soundbite to twist. By mid-morning, the latest headlines splashed across every business channel. Victoria had granted another interview, this time claiming she was worried about Ethan's mental state, and that Jade, with her grand architecture dreams, was likely pressuring him to prove his worth. The interview cut into the day's scheduled coverage of Cole Industries' upcoming pilot project. Instead of discussing sustainability or innovation, news anchors dissected Ethan and Jade's personal motives, painting them as a melodramatic story of desperate ambition and corporate risk. Jade tried to tune it out, burying herself in the details of the pilot plan. She spent hours working with the construction team, ordering specialized materials for a prototype green facility. Then the phone rang. One of their top suppliers abruptly canceled its contract, citing the negative climate around Cole Industries. Her heart sank. Without their materials, the pilot's timeline would be thrown off. Each call she made to find a replacement vendor led to the same cautious reply. "We'd love to work with you, but the scandal is too risky right now." That afternoon, the board called an emergency session, demanding to know why the pilot project was missing key components and warning that if they couldn't see real progress soon, they might force Ethan to step aside as CEO. Jade sat next to him at the glossy table, staring down at the reflection of the overhead lights. Frustration bubbled under her calm exterior. "We need answers," one board member said sharply. "Where's the new contract to replace the cancelled supplier? Have we even secured alternative sources?" Jade explained the steps she'd taken, phone calls made, alternative quotes in progress. But as soon as she finished, a more pessimistic board member spoke up, voice laced with skepticism. "I see no guarantee we'll have the pilot up and running in time. The negative press keeps dragging us down. We're hemorrhaging money on half-finished ideas and a PR nightmare." Ethan, shoulders tense, refused to back down. "We're not discarding the pilot. There's enough interest if we can just hold on and prove ourselves. We have a new investor coming in soon, and Jade's proposals are sound." His gaze swept the table. "I'm not letting rumors derail what could be the future of this company." Though the board session ended on a chilly note, Jade spotted a single flickering ray of hope. Some members still believed in the project, if only for the potential profit. They agreed to give it a little more time. That evening she headed to the construction site to see if any progress could be salvaged despite the supplier fiasco. Just as she arrived, a sleek sedan pulled up. Out stepped a man Jade recognized instantly, the representative of a rival corporation that had tried to undercut Cole Industries in the past. He looked at her with a faint, mocking smile. "Good evening, Ms. Moore," he said, hands in his pockets. "Surprised to see me?" She frowned. "This is private property, and we're in the middle of sensitive construction." He shrugged, casually glancing at the half-built structure. "I heard you were short on materials. Thought I might offer our solutions." He produced a business card with a flourish. "We can supply everything you need at a competitive rate." Her eyes narrowed. It was a blatant attempt to exploit Cole Industries' vulnerability and, more than likely, sabotage from within. "No, thank you," she said curtly, letting his card fall to the ground. "We'll manage." He smirked. "Suit yourself, but from what I hear, time isn't on your side." He stepped closer. "You know, Jade, you'd be better off joining a stable company. A shame to see your talents wasted on a sinking ship. Why not jump before it goes under?" Jade forced herself to keep steady. "I believe in what I'm building here. Leave now, or I'll have security escort you." He spread his hands in mock surrender. "As you wish." Then he backed away, disappearing into the evening air. She exhaled, heart pounding. Clearly these rivals sensed blood in the water, circling them like sharks. Later that night, Jade returned to Cole Industries' main building to finish some paperwork in relative quiet. She found Ethan in his office, slumped in an armchair. He seemed lost in thought, running a hand over his face. A single desk lamp cast warm light across the scattered documents. "You're here late," she said softly, setting her bag down. He forced a small smile. "Couldn't sleep even if I wanted to." Then he took a breath, meeting her gaze. "I'm sorry you're caught in the crossfire." He hesitated. "Ever since these fertility rumors came out, I've questioned everything, my future, my decisions, my worth as a leader." A slight tremor crept into his voice. "I used to be sure I'd have a family someday. Now it feels like that's just another weapon for the tabloids to exploit." Jade's heart ached at the vulnerability in his eyes. She moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Don't let them take your sense of self. They thrive on doubt and spectacle. But that doesn't define who you are or what you can still achieve." He looked at her, searching for a flicker of confidence he might borrow. Her sincerity seemed to steady him. "Thank you," he said at last, voice quiet. Their moment of calm was soon broken by a distant banging in the corridor. A contractor, apparently furious about delayed payments, demanded to speak to Jade. "If you don't fix the supply situation," he yelled through the open doorway, We're pulling our team from the project. We can't afford to waste manpower on half-baked initiatives with no materials." Jade tried to reason with him, explaining the new bids she was negotiating, but he cut her off in frustration. "You can negotiate until your face turns blue, but we're losing money every day. We'll be gone by the end of the week if we don't see a solution." He stomped off, leaving an echo of tension. Their problems felt never-ending. Even a once-friendly board member who had shown Jade early support now seemed less certain. She caught him slipping out of the office that night, looking troubled. When she approached, he admitted, "The pressure from the rest of the board is overwhelming. They want quick results or else, let's just say I don't know how much longer I can stand by you two. I'm sorry." Dejected, Jade returned to her desk. As she sat there, a notification pinged on her screen, an anonymous email with the subject line, "Real medical proof." She opened it cautiously. Inside was a series of cryptic references to sealed documents, supposedly verifying Ethan's full medical history. No attachments were provided, but the message promised more details soon. Jade's stomach twisted with anxiety. If the email was legitimate, maybe it could clear him of Victoria's vicious claims. Or, if twisted out of context, it could add to the firestorm. She rubbed her temples, unsure what to do. Exposing confidential records felt wrong, yet saving the company from endless rumor might require desperate measures. After a moment's hesitation, she shut down her computer, deciding it was too big a decision to make alone. Leaving the building well past midnight, Jade wrapped her coat tight against the cool air. Distant headlights glowed as the few remaining employees trickled out. She felt the day's tension vibrating beneath her skin, and her mind wouldn't stop replaying each new crisis. Her phone suddenly buzzed, startling her. At first she assumed it was Ethan checking in. Then she glanced at the screen. Unknown caller. With a flick of her thumb, she opened the voicemail. A soft hiss crackled on the line, followed by a short burst of laughter, an unmistakable laugh that instantly made her blood run cold. Victoria's voice, muffled but distinct, cut through the static. "They'll never see what's coming next." Ethan woke up to the harsh ring of his phone, a reminder that he no longer enjoyed mornings in calm silence. These days, dawn meant new rumors, new threats, and more uncertainty gnawing at Cole Industries. He thumbed the phone's screen, wincing as a throbbing headache pulsed in his temples. Another reporter was trying to contact him for urgent clarification regarding a rumor he hadn't even heard yet. With a faint grimace, he silenced the call and forced himself out of bed. There was no escaping it, so he might as well face it head-on. By the time he reached the Cole Industries lobby, he found several employees whispering by the reception desk. They fell silent when they saw him, eyes wide with worry or curiosity. He gave them a curt nod, trying not to dwell on the guarded looks. The hardest part was feeling his leadership erode each day, not because he'd lost his business acumen, but because people doubted him on a more personal, raw level. The allegations of infertility, the swirl of scandal with Jade, these intangible whispers were undermining trust in ways cold, hard data never could. A short while later, in his office, Ethan received a grim update from the finance team. 3 more partners had pulled out of minor contracts, citing the volatility of Cole Industries' public image. The official statements were polite, but the subtext was that nobody wanted to remain tied to a sinking ship. He gripped the edge of his desk. Although the deals were relatively small, every loss cut into Cole Industries' stability. Once these cracks started, larger fractures were bound to follow. Jade came in soon after, armed with a new folder of research about suppliers for the pilot project. She was prepared to keep pushing forward, her features drawn but determined. "I managed to contact 2 new potential suppliers," she said. "They're not the biggest names, but they might be willing to provide the materials we need if we can convince them the scandal won't affect their reputations." She paused, noticing Ethan's tense expression. "Any luck on the financial front?" He gave a tired shake of his head. "It's getting worse. Every day that passes, the press escalates and partners spook. Some board members are talking about reevaluating my position. Again." His voice had a fatigued edge. "If we can't stabilize soon, I'm not sure how much longer we can hold out." Jade laid the folder on his desk and sat across from him. Her eyes, though weary, carried a resolute spark. "Then let's prove we can still innovate," she said. "We make the pilot a beacon of hope. We talk to these suppliers together, show them we're serious. It might convince them they'll benefit in the long run." Ethan gave a nod of agreement, partly relieved that she hadn't lost her drive. "I'll set up a meeting. Perhaps if they see us united, they'll be swayed." He paused, not wanting to bring up how the tabloids persisted in painting Jade as a devious partner. To do so risked discouraging her, and right now he needed her spirit unwavering. That afternoon they held a virtual conference with one of the prospective suppliers. The man on the screen seemed skeptical. "I appreciate your passion, but the headlines surrounding coal industries are concerning," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Our clients worry that negative publicity could rub off on them." Jade calmly pulled up her presentation, highlighting the pilot's long-term benefits, the cost savings, and the potential for positive exposure once the project launched. Ethan added his personal guarantee that the company would stand by its commitments. By the end, the supplier's tone softened. "It's a risk," he acknowledged, "but your numbers are compelling. If you can handle a smaller initial shipment, I'm willing to extend you a trial contract." A faint smile appeared. "We'll see if this pilot picks up momentum." Ethan ended the call with relief washing over him. It was a minor victory, only a fraction of the materials they needed, but even a small step felt momentous in the current climate. He turned to Jade. "That's progress." She exhaled slowly, a hint of a smile on her lips. "We'll build on it, one supplier at a time if we have to." The glimmer of hope soon dimmed when an emergency email blasted through the company's internal network. A staffer in accounting discovered more suspicious activity in Jade's project budget, entries that looked tampered with, unapproved expenses recorded, digital footprints leading nowhere. The sabotage was still happening, and it was still hitting Jade's domain the hardest. Both headed down to the finance department where a small crowd had gathered around a glaring red error message on a monitor. The CFO frowned deeply. "Someone's messing with the ledger for the pilot project," he explained. "Random charges are showing up. None are authorized, but they're draining funds until we catch them." Ethan's jaw tensed. "We need to figure out who's behind this. It's beyond carelessness. Someone is deliberately sabotaging our pilot. I want logs. I want security footage. Everything." Jade nodded, eyebrows knit in anger. "I'll help sift through the records. If this is connected to the missing files from before, we might track them to the same culprit." As they left the finance department, Jade tried to remain composed, but the stress was clearly wearing on her. In the corridor, she confided in Ethan, voice low. "It's never ending. Every time we fix one crisis, another one strikes." He rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We keep going. We're closer than we were yesterday. Let's focus on that." They had no sooner parted ways than Jade's phone rang, an unknown number. Feeling a prickle of foreboding, she stepped into an empty office to answer. At first there was silence, followed by static. Then came a voice unmistakably belonging to Victoria, hushed yet distinct. "Enjoy the chaos, Jade? It's about to get worse. Stay close to Ethan if you think that'll help." Jade froze, her pulse pounding. Before she could respond, the line went dead. She had heard the sinister undertone. Victoria wanted her to know that she was behind all the sabotage, or at least intimately involved. With a trembling hand, she ended the call, feeling a surge of fury and alarm. Meanwhile, the turmoil spilled over to the media. News outlets dissected every new twist. Jade's rumored hold on Ethan, the pilot project's repeated setbacks, and the alleged infiltration by corporate rivals. Reports cast Jade as a cunning opportunist, while Ethan was described as an unraveling figure clinging to illusions of grandeur. Outside coal industries, paparazzi waited around the clock, thrusting microphones at employees to gather salacious tidbits. When Ethan spoke with a major news station, hoping to pivot the conversation toward the pilot project's sustainability angle, the reporter twisted his words, fixating on Victoria's allegations instead. "We're hearing that your ex-wife is planning a new bombshell about your private health," the reporter pressed. "Any comment?" He tried to steer the narrative back, reminding them that Cole Industries was forging ahead with innovative designs. But the anchor only pressed further, quoting rumors of documents proving he was unfit to run a family, let alone a major corporation. By the end of the interview, Ethan felt drained, as though he'd been wrestling a snake for 10 minutes, only to find it suffocating him with misinformation. Later that day, Jade set up an ad hoc meeting with a group of employees from different departments, engineers, marketing specialists, and a few junior managers who still believed in the pilot. They gathered in a spare conference room, no fancy slides or big speeches, just raw determination. Jade spoke earnestly. "We have to band together if we want to pull this off. Every piece of sabotage is aimed at scaring us away from this project. We can't let them win." Some looked apprehensive, but there was unity in their faces. A young engineer raised his hand. "I've been combing through system logs, and I might have found a pattern in the sabotage attempts. I want to cross-check with IT. If we can isolate the source, maybe we can expose who's behind it." "Do it," Jade urged, "and be discreet. We're dealing with someone inside the company, or at least someone with inside access." A wave of renewed purpose filled the room. They brainstormed ways to secure their data, to track supply orders more carefully, and to handle the press. For a fleeting moment, it felt like a rally, a glimpse of what Cole Industries could be without fear looming over every move. Ethan, returning from another fraught conversation with the board, joined them halfway through. He stood at the threshold, taking in the sight of his employees united. Something in his posture softened, as if realizing that not everyone was abandoning him. He stepped forward and gave a brief nod. "Thank you for staying strong," he said. "Your faith in us, it matters." One of the junior managers raised a hand. "Mr. Cole, is Victoria really set on destroying the company? Or is this just personal?" He hesitated, recalling the countless ways Victoria had already meddled. "It's hard to separate the personal from the corporate, but it's clear she has alliances, and they want to see us fail. We'll stop them if we stand together." His tone carried more conviction than he had shown in days. That evening, Jade attempted to follow up on the cryptic phone call from Victoria. She searched for any mention of a new surprise in the gossip columns or financial journals. Sure enough, she found hints that Victoria was teasing the final blow against Ethan, claiming fresh evidence about his health that would confirm once and for all he was hiding critical personal failings. The rumors circulated like hungry vultures. Jade's anxiety grew. If Victoria succeeded in releasing damaging documents, fabricated or not, the blow to Cole Industries might be fatal. When Jade informed Ethan, he sagged under the weight of the news, but then an ember of defiance lit in his eyes. "She can't keep playing the same trick," he insisted. "Eventually, the public will demand concrete proof. This time, we'll be ready to discredit her lies." Despite his brave words, there was no denying the pressure was insurmountable. Cole Industries' finances were strained, employees were on edge, and no one knew how many more secrets or sabotage attempts lurked around the corner. The only bright spot was the small group of loyalists determined to see the pilot project through. With them, Jade was convinced they had a fighting chance. Near the end of the day, as the building emptied out, Ethan stood at his office window, phone in hand. It was a rare, quiet moment. Lights flickered across the cityscape beyond the glass, and distant sirens reminded him the outside world never truly slept. His phone buzzed, a new message from a contact in the media. He opened it, reading through lines that made his blood run cold. "Victoria is calling a dawn press conference. You might want to brace yourself. She claims it'll be her biggest bombshell yet. Something about you. And Jade." He walked down the corridor to find Jade, who was in a hushed conversation with the IT clerk about a potential breach in their network. He pulled her aside and showed her the message. Her face paled. "A dawn press conference," she muttered. "Is she really about to drop another fabricated scandal?" Ethan's jaw clenched, but he refused to show defeat. "Whatever it is, we'll face it," he said quietly. Yet a swirl of dread gnawed at his stomach. They had been battered so often with half-truths, rumors, and manipulations. What if, this time, Victoria's evidence was too sensational to refute quickly? They stood there for a moment, locked in silent resolve. Beyond the tall windows, the city lights gleamed like a field of tiny beacons. They both knew the next day could either be a turning point or the final push that sent them over the edge. And then, just as the tension hung thick in the air, the building's TVs flickered to a breaking news alert. The broadcast reporter's voice was urgent, announcing that Victoria Cole had scheduled a surprise press conference at dawn, promising a bombshell revelation about Ethan's health and Jade's role. Ethan woke before sunrise, staring at the ceiling in tense anticipation. He could hear the city starting to stir outside. Car engines, distant sirens, a faint buzz that heralded Victoria's so-called bombshell. The dawn press conference loomed like a coming storm. His phone rested on the bedside table, already full of unanswered messages. Everyone wanted to know if he planned to counter Victoria's accusations. He didn't even know what she intended to reveal, only that it was aimed at him and Jade. By 6:30, he was at Cole Industries, pacing in front of a row of blank TVs in the boardroom. Jade stood next to him, arms crossed, trying to steel herself. A few top executives milled about anxiously, refreshing their phones for the live feed. No one spoke much. The gravity of the moment weighed them all down. Then the screen flickered into life, cutting to a podium set against a backdrop of microphones. A cluster of journalists fidgeted, cameras trained on the stage. Victoria soon stepped forward, immaculately dressed, with the composed confidence of someone holding all the cards. Ethan's chest tightened. He watched every blink and shift in Victoria's expression. He recognized her polished media persona, the gentle tilt of her head, the gracious smile that could mask ferocity. She began by offering a theatrical sigh, as though burdened by sadness. "I'm here today," she said softly, "because I genuinely worry about Ethan Cole." Jade tensed. "She's setting it up like she's the caring ex," she murmured under her breath. Victoria continued, voice dripping with false concern. "We all know there have been troubling rumors about his health. I've hesitated to speak out, but recent developments push me to protect him from further harm." She paused, letting the cameras zoom in. "I'm sorry to say that Ethan, my former husband, has indeed struggled with fertility issues for a long time. These records," she lifted a slim folder, "show his extensive visits to specialists, his repeated attempts at treatments. I have more documentation if it comes to that." Ethan's jaw clenched, watching Victoria brandish the folder. He felt Jade's arm brush his, a small gesture of solidarity, but the sting of betrayal wound deep. Victoria flipped the folder open and drew out a single sheet, raising it for the cameras. It was too far away to see what it said, but the bold print suggested a medical heading. "But that isn't all," Victoria added, her face solemn. "I've also been told that a certain Ms. Jade Moore is intimately involved, not only with Ethan personally, but with orchestrating a scheme to present a false pregnancy for media sympathy. I can't confirm the pregnancy rumors, but—" She pressed a dramatic hand to her chest. "I worry that Ethan is being manipulated by someone who knows exactly how to use his vulnerabilities." A hush fell over the crowd of journalists. Some scribbled furiously, others jostled for better shots. Ethan's heart pounded, a cocktail of anger and dread. Next to him, Jade's face was taut, her eyes shining with shock at how seamlessly Victoria wove lies and insinuations. As soon as Victoria finished, reporters bombarded her with questions. "Are you saying Ethan Cole fabricated Jade's pregnancy to disprove your claims?" Is there evidence that Jade is forging documents? Victoria shook her head in graceful disappointment, claiming she was merely raising concerns and that she hoped Ethan would seek help. Then, with the artful air of a wounded saint, she ended the press conference. In the coal industry's boardroom, the broadcast cut to a panel of commentators dissecting Victoria's words. The executives turned to Ethan, nerves frayed. One muttered, "This is worse than we feared. She's basically accusing you and Jade of staging a pregnancy to salvage your reputation." Jade trembled with anger. How could she stoop so low? She has zero evidence, just a shaky folder of supposed medical records. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Truth barely matters when the spectacle is this big. She's feeding the press a narrative and they'll run with it until proven otherwise. Within minutes, Ethan's phone exploded with calls from the media. Social networks buzzed with hashtags like Josh fake pregnancy scandal and Josh Ethan fertility cover-up. The sense of betrayal and panic reverberated through the entire building. A cluster of employees formed around a TV in the lobby, whispering fears that the company might never recover from this new low. By mid-morning, the board demanded an emergency meeting. Their voices rose the second Ethan and Jade walked in. "Is there any truth whatsoever to these claims?" barked one board member, glowering at Jade. "We can't tolerate more dishonesty." Jade stared him down, voice steady but brimming with frustration. "I'm not pregnant, and I certainly have no reason to fake anything. Victoria is spinning lies to keep the spotlight on Ethan's supposed infertility. She'll say whatever she can to destroy our credibility." The head of PR chimed in, looking exasperated. "This scandal is overshadowing every product launch or corporate initiative we have. We're hemorrhaging goodwill in the market." Ethan lifted his hands, fighting to remain composed. "I can't magically produce medical records to disprove Victoria without crossing serious privacy lines. And Jade shouldn't have to prove anything. This is a blatant attack." The CFO shook his head. "Nevertheless, stockholders and partners need reassurance. If we don't show stability, we're going under." Ethan felt trapped. He understood their fear. He felt it too. But if he turned over confidential medical information, it could set a dangerous precedent. He also worried that any actual records he provided could be twisted by the press. Amid the cacophony, he spotted Jade standing firm beside him, refusing to bow to the board's accusatory tone. They left the boardroom in a swirl of tension. Outside, staff hurried by with sidelong glances, phones clutched in their hands, no doubt staying updated on the news frenzy. Jade touched Ethan's elbow lightly. "Let's regroup," she whispered. "We can't make rash decisions out of fear." He nodded, leading her to a small, glass-walled conference room. They closed the door, craving some privacy. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You never asked for any of this." She gave a resigned smile. "I knew there'd be challenges, but I couldn't predict the extent of Victoria's cruelty. Right now, I'm worried about the pilot project. If we don't push it forward quickly, the board might scrap it to minimize further risk." He sank into a chair, shoulders slumped. "I can't let her dictate the company's future through a personal grudge. We have to move forward no matter what she says." She flipped open a laptop. "Then we get back to the pilot. The partial funding we secured is still on the table, right? Let's confirm a timeline for beginning construction." Their brief pocket of calm shattered when a frantic knock rattled the door. One of Jade's engineering colleagues rushed in, face pale. "There's a problem in the data center. More sabotage, it seems like. Entire sections of the pilot's blueprint got corrupted overnight. Someone tampered with the backups." Jade swore under her breath, immediately moving to leave. "Let's go check it out." They hurried downstairs, passing glass-walled offices full of worried employees. The data center's bluish fluorescent lights cast everything in a sharp glow. Stacks of servers lined the walls, fans humming. A few IT staffers hovered over monitors displaying error messages. Jade dove into the logs, heart hammering as she recognized the traces of unauthorized access again. Meanwhile, Ethan stood behind her, a protective presence, scanning the room for any sign of who might be responsible. An hour later, they confirmed the worst. Their designs had been deliberately scrambled, set to revert to an older, less developed version. The sabotage was methodical, seeking to erase progress and cast doubt on Jade's competence. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion evident. "We'll reconstruct everything," she told the IT team. "Piece by piece if we have to." Ethan, too, felt fatigue creeping into his bones. Another blow, another hurdle. Yet he saw the determination in Jade's stance. She refused to fold, even as the sabotage threatened to derail months of effort. He placed a hand on her back in silent solidarity, then turned to the IT staff. "We'll need to track every keystroke that happened last night. Someone's letting these saboteurs inside. They can't keep getting away with it." By late afternoon, they'd recovered a portion of the corrupted files. Jade insisted on personally overseeing the restoration, working side by side with the IT specialists. Through it all, reporters hovered outside the building, capturing employees on their lunch breaks for any stray comment. Several staff members received unsolicited calls from journalists fishing for dirt about Jade or Ethan's personal lives. The paranoia was almost tangible in the corridors. Determined not to lose heart, Ethan recalled a government official who'd expressed interest in supporting eco-friendly initiatives. "I'll reach out and try to secure a subsidy for the pilot," he told Jade. "If we can show the board we're getting financial backing from outside, it could stabilize their nerves." She nodded, grateful for his persistent optimism. "And I'll finalize the reworked schedule for the pilot. We can't let these sabotage attempts freeze us." Before leaving the office that evening, Jade ducked into a supply closet to retrieve some plotting paper. As she rummaged in the dim light, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Blocked number. Her stomach flipped. Apprehensively, she tapped to answer, saying nothing. At first, she heard only a quiet, static crackle. Then Victoria's voice, chillingly composed. "You must be tired, Jade. All that effort, all that push. And for what? You'll never salvage Ethan's reputation. He'll thank me one day for exposing the truth." Jade's pulse hammered, anger flaring. "You're tearing people apart for your own twisted games," she spat. "And you'll answer for it." Victoria laughed softly. "Make sure you're ready for tomorrow's headlines. By then, I'll have made everything crystal clear." The line went dead before Jade could retort. She stood there, hands shaking around the phone. No matter how much they fought back, Victoria had yet another move ready. That night, well past sunset, Jade and Ethan sat in his office, sifting through the last of the day's emails. A subdued hush enveloped the building as most employees had gone home, seeking distance from the relentless turmoil. He leaned back in his chair, rolling his stiff shoulders. "We'll keep rebuilding, no matter what," he said firmly. "She can't destroy what we've put into this if we don't let her." Jade nodded, although doubt churned in her mind. "I only wish she'd left your personal life out of it. But that's her weapon, turning something private into a public circus." Ethan hesitated, eyes drifting to the dark windows. "She wants to see me humiliated and alone." His gaze shifted back to Jade, a sadness in his expression. "But we won't let that happen." In that small moment, Jade felt a flicker of warmth between them, a solidarity that transcended the crisis. Yet, looming above it all, Victoria's press conference replayed in their minds, her calm display of manufactured documents and insinuations. The tabloids were already ablaze with fresh stories that would greet them the next day, and their rivals circled like vultures. Neither Jade nor Ethan knew what more they could do tonight except keep going, keep hoping. They exchanged a final nod, silently vowing not to bow to Victoria's destructive narrative. Then, just as they were packing up to leave, the alert on Ethan's phone buzzed. A new wave of media articles went live, all hinting at a startling revelation about Jade's integrity. One headline read, "Ex-wife claims Jade Moore's fraudulent history exposed." A chill ran through them. No matter how weary they were, the battle was far from over. Ethan and Jade stare at the faked medical file, hearts pounding. If the public believes it, their small glimmer of hope is gone. Ethan stood in the center of his office, staring at the forged medical file as Jade hovered beside him, eyes full of dismay. It was a single damning piece of paper, riddled with complex jargon and official-looking stamps, proving she had participated in fraudulent schemes, and that any pregnancy rumor swirling around them was part of a calculated scam. Even though Jade had never once claimed to be pregnant, the tabloids would feast on this apparent deception. He could practically see the headlines forming: CEO and his fake heir, a corporate love scam. He exhaled slowly. "We've worked so hard to stabilize the company," he murmured, voice tight. "And now this." Jade's lips pressed together. "I never imagined Victoria would frame me for something so—" Her voice trailed off as she tried to find the right word. "Vicious." He touched her shoulder gently. "We both know these documents are fake. We just need to prove it. Once we show the world they're forged, people might stop believing every wild accusation," Jade finished. But her tone held a shred of uncertainty. The avalanche of bad press, sabotage, and personal betrayals had left them both raw and exhausted. No sooner had they begun brainstorming than the head of PR knocked on the door, face grim. "The board wants an urgent update," she said. "They've seen the medical file. Some of them think Jade's colluding with you to stage a scandal, or that you're colluding with her. It's a mess." Ethan's gut twisted. "Let's get it over with," he said, motioning for Jade to follow. They wound their way to the boardroom, acutely aware of the silent stares from employees in the hallway. The boardroom was coldly hostile. A few sympathetic faces flickered with worry, but most were stony. One member immediately spoke up. "Are you aware this document is circulating online now? Journalists are picking it apart, claiming Jade faked a pregnancy test to boost Ethan's image. Did you two seriously think you could fool everybody into believing an heir would fix the fertility rumors?" Jade's cheeks burned. "I've never told anyone I was pregnant," she replied, voice trembling with anger. "Victoria is orchestrating these lies. She's the one who brought up the possibility of me expecting a baby, not me." Another board member sighed heavily. "It doesn't matter who started the rumor. The public is swallowing it whole, and we're on the verge of collapse. The pilot project is stalled again. Investors are fleeing. We can't keep burning through resources without clear leadership." Ethan leaned forward. "I haven't wavered from leading," he said quietly. "I'm fighting tooth and nail to save this company. Jade's proposal is one of our best hopes for a new revenue stream and a rejuvenated public image." His words fell into thick silence. The tension in the room felt suffocating. Finally, the board's legal counsel cleared her throat. "We might be dealing with a deeper conspiracy. The sabotage, these fraudulent papers, someone is deliberately undermining us. If we can unmask them, that could change everything." As they left the meeting, Jade pulled Ethan aside. "If the board is even hinting that they believe this nonsense, we're one misstep away from disaster." He frowned, concern etched into his features. "Then we need proof. We need something solid that traces these lies back to Victoria and whoever else she's working with." He paused, remembering the name of a junior IT clerk who had been quietly piecing together digital clues. "Let's see if they've turned up anything." A short walk later, they found themselves in a cramped back-office room where the clerk hunched over a computer. Multiple data windows and code scripts lined the screen. He glanced up nervously. "I've been analyzing every suspicious email that's come in. There's a pattern of messages from an untraceable proxy, forwarding files that match the style of the forged medical record." He tapped the keyboard, pulling up a digital signature. "Look, it's faint, but it resembles a coding structure used by the rival corporation we've been suspecting." Ethan felt a surge of hope. "Can you link it directly to them?" The clerk winced. "It's tough. They're masking their tracks. But with enough time, maybe I can establish a trail that connects Victoria and the rival CEO to these forgeries." Jade nodded, adrenaline flickering in her eyes. "That might be our smoking gun. Keep at it. Anything you find, Send to the legal team immediately." Despite this glimmer of a breakthrough, the day continued to slam them with setbacks. Angry vendors called, worried about the rumored scandal around Jade. A local news station picked up a tip that Jade was under federal investigation for fraud, a blatant lie that, once broadcast, only fueled the internet's rumor mill. By afternoon, the tension in coal industries was palpable. Nobody knew if the company would survive another week. Ethan, determined not to buckle under the weight of adversity, arranged an unscheduled gathering with a handful of employees who still believed in Jade's vision. They gathered in a modest conference room, no frills, just a battered projector and cold coffee in styrofoam cups. He set the tone in a low, steady voice. "We need to refocus on what made coal industries thrive before. Resilience, innovation, and loyalty to each other. Jade's pilot might be our last chance." They spent the next hour hashing out a plan to accelerate a reduced version of the pilot, something they could show to prospective clients quickly. A shortened timeline, smaller scope, but big enough to prove their capabilities. It wouldn't magically quell the rumors, but at least it would demonstrate action. At some point, Jade had to slip away to the bathroom where she splashed water on her face. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, a professional, calm facade concealing a storm of fear. Just as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. "You can't hide behind Ethan's name forever. We will destroy everything you've built." Her hands clenched around the device. The walls felt like they were closing in. How much more could she endure? Back in the conference room, she shared the text with Ethan. His face darkened. "They're relentless, but so are we." As evening approached, the CFO arrived with dire news. The next shareholder vote was set for the following day. Rumors swirled that Victoria and her allies had convinced a block of major shareholders to vote Ethan out if the company's public image didn't improve. "We're on the edge," the CFO said. "If you lose this vote, you'll be removed as CEO and coal industries might be sold off." Ethan's chest constricted. A slow, heavy dread settled between them. Jade squeezed his arm. "We can't let them do that. We have to fight. We have a small piece of evidence pointing to sabotage. If we can get it ready in time, we might sway the shareholders." But the CFO shook his head. "We need more than speculation. They'll ask for definitive proof that Victoria and the rival are behind these attacks. Otherwise, they'll see you as a liability." A hush filled the room. Ethan swallowed, forcing out a measured breath. "Then we'll do it tonight. We'll work with IT, legal, and anyone else who can gather enough to at least raise doubt about Victoria's claims." "Jade, if you're up for it," she cut him off with a firm nod. "I'm with you. Let's do whatever it takes." They dove into a long, grueling marathon of cross-referencing digital logs, analyzing transaction records, and calling in every favor from staff who could testify to the sabotage. By 9 o'clock, the offices felt like a war room. Phones ringing, documents strewn across desks, people huddling in hushed conversations. It was exhausting, but for the first time in days, they had a singular purpose that fueled them: survival. Around midnight, a junior paralegal sprinted in, eyes alight with excitement. "We found a link to the senior executive who used his credentials for those sabotage attempts," he exclaimed. "He's been in contact with the rival's legal team. Email chains, encrypted but partially recoverable. This proves inside collusion." Ethan exchanged a triumphant look with Jade. Finally, real evidence. With renewed vigor, they compiled the findings. They were far from bulletproof, but it was enough to implicate at least one person inside coal industries who was working for the competition. It could cast major doubt on any documents or rumors that had emerged under questionable means. The tension in the room eased slightly, replaced by a cautious hope that they might have a fighting chance in the upcoming shareholder vote. Ravenous and exhausted, Ethan left the building close to 1 a.m. to grab a quick meal at a small restaurant nearby. The neon lights flickered outside as he settled into a corner booth, mind churning over the day's chaos. If the shareholders saw their evidence, Perhaps they would hold off on removing him, giving Jade and the pilot project a chance to prove itself. He finished eating and walked out onto the sidewalk, the air cool against his face. He found a quiet spot, exhaling slowly, determined not to crumble under pressure. For a moment he felt the night's calm wrap around him, a stark contrast to the frenzy inside Cole Industries. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket. He picked up at once when he saw Jade's name. Her voice sounded urgent, almost breathless. "Ethan, the shareholder vote is being moved up to tomorrow morning. I just got word from the CFO. They're coming after us in tomorrow's shareholder vote. If we don't stop this, we lose everything." Ethan arrived at Cole Industries at the crack of dawn, determination etched into every line of his face. He had barely slept after Jade's urgent call the night before, announcing the accelerated shareholder vote. Yet there was no time to dwell on exhaustion. The moment he stepped into the lobby, he was greeted by anxious employees who exchanged whispers, eyes flicking to him in silent appeal. Tension weighed down every corner of the building, as though the very walls sensed the day's importance. He made his way to a private meeting room on the 20th floor. Through the glass walls, the city stretched out in dusky morning light. Jade was already inside, surrounded by a small cluster of trusted allies. The junior paralegal who had helped uncover evidence of inside collusion, a couple of sympathetic board members, and the IT clerk who had been sifting through endless digital logs. A thick hush blanketed the group. "We need to finalize everything we'll present," Jade said, voice low but resolute. She rested a hand on her stomach, almost absently. Though she had yet to share her pregnancy with most people, the subtle curve of her belly was becoming harder to hide. The constant stress had taken its toll. Dark shadows lingered under her eyes, but she kept her chin lifted, ready to fight. "If we don't prove sabotage and show we're still viable, the shareholders will side with Victoria's narrative." Ethan nodded, pressing the bridge of his nose. "We focus on two key points. First, the direct link between the senior executive and our rival corporation. Second, the forged medical files supposedly implicating Jade. We show how both were designed to undermine the pilot project and discredit me." He gestured to the junior paralegal. "Any luck translating all that data into something the shareholders can grasp quickly?" The paralegal lifted a thick manila folder. "We distilled it down to a few bullet points and diagrams, enough to raise serious doubts about Victoria's claims and about whoever she's working with." One of the friendlier board members cleared his throat. "This could work. If we give them a reason to question the sabotage, it might stall any immediate move to vote Ethan out. Then we can push forward with the pilot." Jade paced restlessly. "We'll also need a strong plan for restoring faith in Cole Industries, or they'll accuse us of focusing on personal drama. Maybe highlight how close the pilot is to completion, that new suppliers are on board. Numbers speak loudly." Ethan tossed her a small smile of thanks. "Sounds good. Let's get it all together." While they organized their findings, a ruckus erupted in the corridor. Voices rose, followed by the click of high heels on polished floors. Before anyone could react, Victoria swept into the meeting room, exuding confidence. Her hair was neatly styled, and she wore a tailored suit that did nothing to disguise the gleam of triumph in her eyes. "Well, hello," she purred, glancing at Jade, then at Ethan. "Hard at work trying to salvage what's left." She feigned a sympathetic smile. "I wanted to address some personal matters with Ethan before the big vote." Ethan's spine stiffened. "This is a private meeting, Victoria. You're not welcome here." She merely shrugged, pulling a folded sheet of paper from her purse. "Let's skip the pleasantries. I have a proposition for you. If you cede a certain percentage of your shares to me, I'll make a public statement retracting the accusations about Jade's fraudulent pregnancy, assuming she's truly not pregnant, of course." Jade's hand went protectively to her belly, a silent reflex. She forced herself to remain still. "You have no right to barge in here, making demands." Victoria arched a brow. "Don't I? From where I stand, my credibility is high among the shareholders, given the fiasco you two have created. Think carefully. You hand me some control of coal industries and I'll ease the pressure." A tense silence descended. Ethan clenched his fists at his sides, everything in him balking at giving Victoria any more power. "You've done nothing but sabotage this company," he managed, tone razor-sharp. "What you're suggesting is blackmail." She gave a mirthless chuckle, stepping closer so only he could hear. "Call it whatever you want. I won't walk away empty-handed. Not after the years I spent by your side." He stared her down, anger thrumming through his veins. "Get out," he repeated. "I have nothing more to say." Victoria's eyes flickered with resentment. "Fine. Just remember that after today's vote, you may not have a company left." She turned on her heel and strutted out, leaving a thick air of hostility in her wake. Jade breathed out, still shaken by the confrontation. "We have to keep pushing. She's banking on intimidation." Nodding, Ethan scanned the faces of those present. Some looked rattled, but no one abandoned their post. They finished organizing their evidence, aware that the clock was ticking. Soon, they would all file into the grand auditorium where shareholders waited, uncertain whether Ethan could steer the company away from disaster. As midday approached, Jade felt a wave of dizziness. She'd been fighting nausea all morning, and the sudden rush of adrenaline only made it worse. One of the paralegals noticed her pale face. "Are you all right? You look a bit unsteady." She forced a small smile. "Just a headache. Too much going on." She didn't mention the pregnancy. Not here and now. The time wasn't right, and she didn't want to add more chaos to the day. They forged ahead. Ethan reviewed the final slides for their presentation, then gathered the group. "This is it," he said quietly. "We either convince them we have a future or lose it all." They departed in unison, taking the elevator down to the main floor. On the ride, nobody spoke. The hum of the elevator felt like a drum roll. Once in the lobby, they passed through clusters of employees who glanced at Jade and Ethan with hopeful or worried eyes. Outside, the paparazzi waited, camera flashes exploding like tiny bursts of lightning. Security guards helped push back the crowd as Ethan and Jade slipped into a black sedan provided by the company. The drive to the grand auditorium took less than 10 minutes. Skyscrapers zoomed by in a blur, and Jade tried to focus on the mental notes she'd prepared. She replayed the sabotage evidence, the timeline of suspicious transactions, and ways to best articulate the pilot project's potential. Each time she shifted in her seat, the seatbelt pressed gently against her growing belly, a quiet reminder of the stakes beyond the corporate battlefield. Ethan studied her profile as they turned onto the final street. A flicker of concern passed through his eyes. "Promise me you'll tell me if you need to step back," he said softly. She gave him a determined glance. "I can handle it. Let's save our company first." As soon as the car pulled up to the auditorium, they could see swarms of people filing inside, shareholders, media representatives, and corporate allies or enemies. The imposing glass facade gleamed in the daylight, offering no hint of what would transpire within. Ethan stepped out, then reached for Jade's hand to help her from the car. Flashes erupted once more, and a wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. They moved toward the large double doors, flanked by security, hearts pounding with each step. Inside, the grandeur of the space struck them momentarily silent. High ceilings, rows of plush seats, a stage at the front for the principal speakers. Clusters of well-dressed investors chatted among themselves, many wearing expressions of skepticism. At the far side of the auditorium, official nameplates indicated the seating area for the board and special guests. Jade felt her pulse quicken. She spotted a few supportive faces, those who had championed the pilot project or remained loyal to Ethan's leadership. But the mood remained heavy, overshadowed by the sense that a single misstep could mean the end of coal industries as they knew it. Then, as they approached the front section, Ethan froze. Jade followed his gaze and felt her stomach twist. Victoria was already seated, perched with regal poise next to the rival corporation's CEO, both wearing triumphant smiles. Ethan stood at the front of the massive auditorium, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes fixed on him. The air buzzed with expectation, laced with tension so thick it might as well have been visible. Rows upon rows of shareholders sat in polished seats, awaiting the verdict on whether he would remain CEO of coal industries or be forced out by scandal and rumor. At the edge of the stage, Jade hovered close by, papers in her grip, her face etched with steeled resolve. Neither of them would bow without a fight. The auditorium lights dimmed, and a hush swept over the assembled crowd. A single spotlight illuminated Ethan as he stepped toward the microphone. He cleared his throat, trying to slow the pulse hammering in his ears. Beside him, Jade offered a nearly imperceptible nod of encouragement. That small gesture steadied him, reminding him they were in this together. "Good morning," Ethan began, voice reverberating through the sound system. "Thank you all for coming. I realize there are serious concerns about the direction of coal industries. Rumors and accusations have painted a bleak picture, but I'm here to show you the truth, and the future we can still secure." Victoria, seated conspicuously near the rival corporation's CEO, crossed her legs, an amused tilt to her lips. She appeared relaxed, as if she expected the spectacle to play right into her hands. Ethan refused to meet her gaze. Instead, he raised a folder and held it up for everyone to see. "In recent months, we've experienced sabotage," Ethan said. "Files were deleted, budgets tampered with, damaging documents fabricated. Our internal investigation has uncovered evidence linking these acts to certain external forces, and regrettably to someone within coal industries who betrayed us." He paused to let that bombshell settle over the crowd. Murmurs rippled through the audience. From the corner of his eye, Ethan saw Jade discreetly pull up the first slide on a large screen behind them. A chart and digital timestamps blinked into view. One of their trusted associates stepped forward to narrate, explaining how leaked emails, suspicious access logs, and hidden transactions all pointed to a senior executive acting on behalf of a corporate rival. The paralegal then revealed portions of chat logs showing direct communication between that executive and Victoria's associates, culminating in multiple attempts to sabotage the pilot project and discredit Ethan's leadership. "These are not mere accusations," Ethan emphasized. "They're backed by digital forensics and personal testimonies. The sabotage was real and carefully orchestrated." Gasps and low conversation filled the room. Several board members leaned forward, shock shifting on their faces. Victoria's smile faltered, her hands clenching around her purse. She traded a glance with the rival CEO, who was flipping through documents with a scowl. Jade fought the urge to glance their way. She kept her posture poised, focusing on the presentation. Next, Jade stepped to the microphone, voice firm. "Part of these attempts involved forging medical records, aimed at defaming Ethan and myself. We've traced the documents' digital signatures back to the same network used for prior sabotage activities." She clicked to a new slide, displaying a manipulated record with red markers highlighting inconsistencies. "I have never claimed to be pregnant. These false claims were meant to erode trust and undermine coal industries from within." A wave of uncertain whispers rumbled through the shareholders. Some studied the screen intently, others glared toward Victoria's seat. Jade kept her composure, though her fingers clutched the edges of the podium. Ethan gently placed a hand on her arm, stepping back to the microphone. "Despite the sabotage, coal industries has a bright future. Our pilot project, an initiative spearheaded by Ms. Jade Moore, offers a transformative leap in sustainable design." He clicked another slide, revealing an architectural rendering of an eco-friendly facility. "Even under attack, we've secured new supplier contracts and government incentives. If we can move forward, we'll save costs, reduce emissions, and gain a solid foothold in an emerging market." At this, one of the previously skeptical board members rose from his seat. "Mr. Cole, you claim to have evidence of sabotage and a strong plan to move forward. But can you guarantee the stability of this company after all this negative press? Ethan faced him calmly. We can't erase the past few months, but we can commit to transparency and progress. We're ready to rebuild investor confidence by demonstrating real outcomes through the pilot project's immediate implementation. He scanned the room. We hope the shareholders will stand by us in forging a new path. We have the data, the design, and the drive. He clicked off the slideshow, turning to the audience. You all came here to decide whether Cole Industries has a future under my leadership. Let's make that decision based on facts, not manipulations. And let's remember that no one person's ambition should overshadow the company's true potential. A hush descended, broken only by the rustle of papers and the muted hum of the overhead lights. The shareholders shifted restlessly, absorbing the revelation of sabotage and the promise of renewal. Victoria, however, stood abruptly, head held high. I have a statement, she announced. With the rival CEO at her side, she marched to a second microphone stand. A wave of tension rippled through the auditorium. The sense that another confrontation was coming felt almost electric. Victoria drew a breath, as though preparing to deliver one final blow. Before she could speak, a commotion from the back of the auditorium interrupted her. A small group of Cole Industries employees, those who'd worked tirelessly on the pilot or had been personally affected by the sabotage, stepped forward. Led by the young IT clerk who had uncovered the sabotage logs, they held physical copies of the incriminating emails and tampered design files, ready to corroborate Ethan and Jade's account. One by one, they lined up at a microphone set up for open commentary. Each briefly explained the sabotage they'd witnessed: missing blueprints, suspicious instructions, repeated attempts to distort data. Their voices rang with conviction, evidence that any narrative about Jade's wrongdoing had been fabricated to keep suspicion away from the real perpetrators. The final speaker handed the documents to a board member, who accepted them gravely. Victoria's mouth tightened. Her grandstand moment was slipping away with each word of testimony. The rival CEO tried to step in, but the employees' voices drowned him out. A hush returned only when they finished, leaving the entire auditorium to process their accounts. Ethan faced the shareholders again, shoulders squared, voice steady. This is a pivotal moment for Cole Industries. Let's choose renewal and progress over fear and rumors. If you vote for my removal, you'll hand the company to those who orchestrated these lies and sabotage. If you allow Jade's pilot project to continue, we will prove that we're still the innovative enterprise you believed in. A short, charged silence followed. Then the chair of the shareholder committee announced, "We will hold a final vote. All in favor of removing Ethan Cole from his position, please submit your votes via the electronic system at your seats. All opposed, do likewise." The room filled with a near-hypnotic hum as shareholders tapped screens, weighed new information, and cast their ballots. In the tension-soaked air, the seconds stretched like hours. Finally, the board's official tallied the votes. He stood, cleared his throat, and spoke with a slight tremor. By a margin of 65 to 35, the shareholders have voted to retain Ethan Cole as CEO. Furthermore, the pilot project will receive immediate support and funding allocations. A collective exhale seemed to ripple through half the auditorium. Applause broke out spontaneously from the employees who had risked their reputations to speak the truth. On stage, Ethan closed his eyes for half a second, relief flooding through him. Jade pressed a trembling hand to her chest, tears in her eyes. This was the fresh start they'd been desperate for. Victoria's face twisted with fury, and the rival CEO stood behind her looking equally outraged. They attempted to speak, but a wave of shareholder dissent silenced them. Security personnel stepped forward, and the two troublemakers found themselves cornered by angry investors demanding explanations for the sabotage. Disgraced, Victoria and her cohort made a rushed exit, the cameras snapping behind them. Once the tumult died down, Ethan turned to Jade. Words failed him at first. In the swirl of relief, he caught her emotional gaze, understanding how much each of them had endured. Applause swelled again in the auditorium, turning into a standing ovation for the entire coal industries team. With a grateful nod to the crowd, Ethan gently took Jade's hand and guided her off stage. In the days that followed, the sabotage ring was fully exposed, with key figures implicated and a complete restructuring initiated. The pilot project, Jade's brainchild, progressed at a remarkable pace now that the sabotage had ended. New suppliers came on board, excited by the renewed optimism around coal industries, and Jade's initial designs were greenlit for construction. Government grants arrived, thanks to the official Ethan had contacted weeks ago, giving the project the final push it needed. Behind the scenes, Jade scheduled a private meeting with Ethan to share the biggest news yet. She was pregnant, not with a single child, but with triplets. Though she initially worried about how he would react, fearful of how more surprises might affect the newly stabilized company, Ethan's face lit up with an unmistakable mix of wonder and joy. The rumors Victoria had flung around took on a twisted irony. Jade was, in fact, carrying new life, and proof that Ethan wasn't the infertile figure his ex-wife had portrayed. When Jade's pregnancy was finally announced to the public, it arrived alongside proof that Victoria's claims and documents had all been forged. The corporate world watched in astonishment as coal industries soared to new heights of credibility. Official statements and heartfelt interviews underscored that this was no show, no contrived spectacle, but a genuine new chapter in both Ethan and Jade's personal lives. Their employees, once consumed by fear, now shared the buoyant mood of success. The offices brimmed with chatter about the eco-friendly pilot taking shape and the CEO's unexpected future as a father of 3. It seemed as though every day brought some fresh sign of healing. An investor returning, a piece of positive press, a pat on the back in the hallway. On a crisp morning, as the final steel frame for the pilot facility rose against the skyline, Ethan and Jade stood together near the construction site. Camera crews and journalists swarmed, eager for a glimpse of the newly vindicated CEO and the architect behind the company's transformation. Jade, now visibly pregnant, wore a calm, glowing expression. Ethan slid an arm around her shoulders protectively, smiling for the cameras. Reporters shouted questions about the sabotage scandal, about future expansions, about the babies on the way. In each response, Ethan's voice carried the quiet strength of someone who had faced the abyss and come back renewed. They posed together for a photo in front of the steel beams, living symbols of resilience and new beginnings. When the official ribbon cutting concluded, Jade slipped her hand into Ethan's. The cameras rolled, capturing his gentle whisper, "We did it, all of us." Her eyes shone, and he squeezed her hand in return. Ethan steps into a bright morning light, flanked by Jade and fully aware that 3 little lives are on the way. Cameras flash, capturing the moment of triumph. A sense of possibility and renewal radiates in the air, proving once and for all that even the fiercest storms can lead to a brand new dawn. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.